Your blood runs orange and blue. This is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it, New York.
You don't got to worry about any refs on this podcast. No refs to come in at the end of this podcast and decide how it's going to end. This is a podcast decided by the players on the episode. This is EJ Stewart here on Orange and Blue Bloods with Tommy Beer. Big show we got for you guys. Josh Hart debut we'll be talking about. Of course, we have this big Nets game happening Monday night. Nets and Knicks. It's totally different team the Knicks will be facing when they face these Brooklyn Nets. I wonder if some of the sting is taken out of this game because you don't have Kyrie and KD on the floor. So we'll talk about that as well. And we'll talk about yet another snub of Jalen Brunson from the AllStar Game. So plenty to get to on this episode. Joining me, of course, like I said, is Tommy Beer. Tommy, we did have the Super Bowl on Sunday night, and I don't know about you, but I still feel a little sick about how that game ended. I'm hoping that we can have an NBA playoffs and NBA finals that don't have an ending where the refs decide what happens as opposed to letting the players decide the outcome of a game.
Yeah, man, that's tough. I feel for all you Birds fans out there. My sympathies go out to you. It's a tough way to lose. If you get beat fair and square, by a great Pat Mahomes drive or something along those lines, you can deal with it. Or if Hurts has a chance and throws a pick on the final, with a minute left, that's something a little bit easy to swallow. But having a questionable holding call hurts. Listen. As Knicks fans out there know, no pain, and they can only hope to get to the finals and be robbed by the refs. They got a long way to go, but they took a nice. Looks like they have a nice piece that if they should be a playoff team, a team that can make some noise in the playoffs, it looks like they found a guy that might be part of the solution, a piece of the puzzle, so they say.
Yeah, we'll definitely be talking about that. We'll be talking plenty of Josh Hart probably for the rest of the season. And this is, again, Orange and Blue Bloods, a podcast hosted by Audacy, and Audacy original, hosted by WFAN as well. You can get these episodes wherever you get your podcasts, including the free Audacy app. Make sure you hit the auto download feature so you can get these episodes whenever we drop. We drop 3 times a week. This is our first episode of the week. And, of course, make sure you check us out on YouTube as well at the Audacy Sports channel to watch these episodes of Orange and Blue Bloods. So let's begin with Saturday night. Josh Hart, new Knick, impressive in his debut. He helped the Knicks get past the Utah Jazz 126-120 on Saturday at Madison Square Garden. Hart, I thought, was exceptional in the game. 11 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 4 steals, really filling up the box score. Jalen Brunson had another monster game now that he's reunited with his good buddy. He had 38 points in this one. Julius Randle had 31. RJ Barrett had 20. A little bit of an uneven game for Barrett, but hit a big 3 down the stretch. Go par for the course for RJ at this point in the season. So let's get right into it with Josh Hart. What did you see from him, and how do you think that this play that you saw in the game one could kind of carry over throughout the rest of the season?
Yeah, I thought that they interviewed Hart and Brunson after the win Saturday night on MSG, and Rebecca Harlow asked Brunson, what does he bring to the table? Essentially, what can Knicks fans expect from him? And Brunson's first word was everything. Whatever we need, he's been the player. He's been that player since day one. That's just who he is. And I think that kind of sums up, Josh Hart in a sentence, in a word. And it's kind of what we predicted. I thought we were both really high on the trade. We both thought it'd be a great addition. Yep. And the player showed why in his first game. If you want to, he checked in with about 5 minutes left in the third quarter and never checked back out. I think that kind of, speaks to his importance on the team. The trust he immediately has in the coach, because he does all the things that you want. And we saw all those within the 25 minutes, box out, set screens, keep loose balls alive, find, get an offensive rebound, kick it out for a 3-pointer, talk on defense, hit corner 3-pointers, just everything that, that you could kind of want from an elite role player. We got a taste of it Saturday night, and Hart, it's just really that's what you were hoping to see. And that's what he delivered. You only get a first chance to make a first impression, and he certainly made the most of it.
Yeah, it's like I've been saying pretty much since we kind of broke the topic of Josh Hart potentially becoming a Knick, was he's the guy that the Knicks to me were missing. They were missing a glue guy. They were missing a glue guy, particularly on the wing, who can guard multiple defenders. We saw his defense in that game. We saw his ability to get loose balls. Like, how many games this season from the Knicks did you see long rebounds go to the other team and them hit a big three or extend an offensive possession that will crush the Knicks? How many times in that game on Saturday you see Josh Hart running down loose balls, running down long rebounds for either defensive rebounds or offensive rebounds? The guy just he plays with an edge, even though he's kind of like a gentleman, off the court. He's awesome. I thought in this game, like I said, the rebounding and the shot making, he had a big three down the stretch, was great. And the shot making, we'll see how much that carries over in terms of the three ball. I think he was 2 for 3 in that game. But I almost think the thing that most impressed me was the assists. I mean, some of these passes, and it was just making the simple pass. Because sometimes you see some of these guys, Julius Randle, RJ, sometimes when they get the ball in the paint, they sometimes want to make the most complicated pass to a guy who's not. Yeah.
Or when RJ has the ball at the 3-point line and Obi Toppin screaming,
he doesn't. Yeah, they don't pass at all. Right. Yeah, there's times where they get tunnel vision or they don't make a play. And to see Josh Hart multiple times on that stretch just get into the paint and just deliver the ball on time, on target to RJ in the corner. He had some other guys. I think he had Brunson at one point. Like, that's just simple basketball. But, I mean, that's winning basketball. And the fact that he came in on night one, had such an impact, I think he had to be really excited with what you saw from him.
Yeah, I think the best thing you can say about Hart is he would fit in with the 90s Knicks, with Mason and Ewing and Starks and Oakley. Like, he's a guy you could definitely see fitting in and earning the respect of those guys because he plays hard, he plays gritty, he's not afraid to do the dirty work. And that's the type of player. And he even talked about it. He basically said, like, I know New York respects a blue collar, work ethic, somebody that's willing to do the dirty work, the stuff that doesn't necessarily show up in the box score. That's what I'm going to do. And that's why I think it's a great fit, kind of alluding that he envisions himself here long term. And I think the Knicks do as well. So, just a wonderful introduction to a player. And we'll see if it carries over Monday night. And again, he's not going to have great games. There's going to be games where he doesn't have standout performances because that's kind of the nature of the beast when you're kind of a 3-and-D wing. And, you especially it looks like he'll be coming off the bench. But I was kind of charting just that first game, like those little small things that he did. The loose balls, kept the ball alive, boxed out so a teammate could get a rebound. You figure in this first game, there's 3 or 4 of those, but you quickly realize it's darn near every possession. He does something that help a team win, and like you said, he's a winner. That's probably the best way to classify it.
And I think one of the things that you can't lose sight of as well with a player like Hart is that kind of energy and that kind of play is infectious.
Yeah.
So, like, Knicks not having a guy like that really, it hurts them because they don't see the guy going after the loose ball. And they, I'm not saying they don't have guys that hustle because Harden's not hustles, Grimes hustles, but not having a guy who's experienced, a guy who has played in this league for a little while and who is a pure just intangibles guy, like that should affect the other guys. You should see Randall play with a certain level of edge. You see RJ edge. I think that you'll see a great impact because of what Josh Hart brings to the table. You see a guy playing that hard, you can't help but join in on the effort. So I think that he had a really great debut, and we saw in this game Josh Hart come off the bench in this one, and the way Tibbs kind of handled the rotations on the stretch was interesting. It seemed like kind of Grimes quickly and RJ kind of were essentially rotating time during that stretch as Hart played the entire way. It leads to the question, do you see Josh Hart as a guy who definitely closes most games? Do you think this is going to be kind of a by committee situation moving forward? And does he have a case to start, given how he played? And, we're starting to see Quentin Grimes struggle with his jump shot a little bit.
I think he certainly does could make a case that he should start. And in fact, I think the better fit would be him replacing Barrett as opposed to replacing Grimes, just because of how how he would fit alongside Brunson and Randall. But just as far as like the starting issue, I don't think he'll start, and I don't think he'll start going forward. It seems like he's comfortable coming off the bench. It's probably best for the egos of all involved. If he stays that way for a little while, if somebody gets injured, then he gets inserted into the starting lineup. I could see it as a situation where he never comes back out of the starting lineup. For the time being, I think it makes sense to leave him as the kind of the sixth man. And when people, even before the trade, like, buddies asking me, like, do you think he'll start? Who do you think he'll bump? I said, I don't know if he'll start or not, but I think he'll be the part of the closing five, which is, the more important situation. And as well as Hart played, it introduces some complexities. There's some ripple effects when Hart played that well and plays the final, basically 17 minutes of the game. Emmanuel quickly, who played well on Saturday night, 15 points, 5 boards. He logged less than 25 minutes. It's only the second time since Christmas he's played less than 25 minutes. Grimes played poorly Saturday night, the second bad game in a row for Grimes, who was not knocking down shots. He played just 22 minutes. It's the first time he's logged less than 28 minutes since mid-December. So that just kind of goes to show you that there's going to be there's an impact here. And then obviously Deuce McBride was a DMPCD. Right. It's the first time since late November he has not played at all. Tibbs, as we were kind of wondering, would he keep that 9-man rotation? He did in fact stick with 9 guys, and Deuce was on the outside looking in. It's very hard to argue that Hart should have seen less playing time. We saw the impact that he had. It's hard to argue that Grimes should have got more minutes because he scored 1 point, missed all his field goal attempts. So he needs to play better. He needs to knock down shots. I think he will. I think that'll come. But again, on nights, prior to Saturday night this season, if Grimes was struggling as bad as he did, Tibbs didn't have another option. So Grimes if RJ struggles on a given night, you don't really have another option. So, RJ, even when he's playing poorly and inefficiently and not seeing the floor and getting beat defensively, he's still going to play 33, 34 minutes a night. That's no longer the case. So I think it amps up a little bit of pressure. Not only does seeing Hart play as well as he does, as hard as he does, kind of ratchet up the intensity for all the guys on the floor. I think it ratchets it up, the competitive intensity just within that little that trio. I think on any given night, it's going to be those 4 guys are going to divvy up minutes. Grimes, IQ, Barrett, and Hart. And I think it might be a little bit, let's say they play a team with that has a few quick perimeter players, then you want IQ in there, alongside Brunson. If you're playing a team that like the Jazz, who have 3 7-footers on the floor basically at all times, you might want a little more length. So therefore Hart is a better fit. So I think those are the kind of situations. And obviously, if a guy's knocking out shots, if he's 6 for 8 from the field that game, all that stuff will get factored in. But it'll be very interesting to see how Tibbs kind of distributes the minutes going forward. He didn't have now that there are legitimate competition for those minutes, especially on the wing. It'll be very interesting to see how Tibbs handles it.
Yeah, and even though Tibbs stick to the 9-man rotation, outside of Brunson and Randall logging in normal 39 minutes in this game, everybody else had really reasonable totals when it came to their minutes. RJ had 34, Grimes, you mentioned 22, Quickly 23, Hart 26. Like the fact that Hart is a more viable guy to play for 26 minutes as opposed to playing McBride those kind of minutes, it could end up helping really all those guys who play in the backcourt and on the wing, because they can all rotate minutes and keep them more fresh. And I think that it will be a great benefit to someone like Quentin Grimes. So I think maybe seeing a little bit of the sophomore wall, maybe not a rookie wall per se, but it might be a little bit of a sophomore wall because, you can see the shot isn't really connecting right now. And he may need some time not playing 30 minutes every single night, considering this was a guy who didn't play much last season.
Totally, and I think that's a really good point because people forget he only played in 46. Only started 6 games.
Exactly.
It's up to 42 starts. He only logged a total of 700. I'm looking at it now, 86 minutes. He's already at over 1,400 now, so he's at double those minutes. So it's kind of the transition. The reason for the rookie, the rookie wall in the NBA is you play 30 games in college to go to 82 in the NBA. It's a big transition there. So you're right, his legs might be a little bit tired.
Yeah. So that's going to be something to follow. But this was overall a good Knicks win. I mean, this is a game. It's funny to see these games and you're like, wow, that's a game they wouldn't have won. But it's always sometimes for different reasons. Sometimes it's because Randall is playing with a certain level of focus, and he played really well in this game as well. Sometimes a lot of times it's Jalen Brunson being able to organize a team and get good shots down the stretch. And that was a game I thought with Josh Hart and his effort and his hustle and his clutch shot making and his clutch decision making, where I'm like, I don't know if the Knicks win this game last week. You see that lead and you see it evaporate, and you kind of I wonder if they win that game last week without Josh Hart. I think there's a chance they don't. So credit to the Knicks. Big win is when they need to have when you're playing against a Jazz team that's a solid team, but a team that's under 500, a team that maybe about to hit the downside now that they've lost their starting point guard in Mike Conley. And at the trade deadline, they also lost Vanderbilt and Beasley. So definitely a good win for the Knicks. So that moves us to Monday night. Knicks look to snap their 9-game losing streak against the Brooklyn Nets when the two teams face off at MSG. The Nets are going to look very different when you see them this time around. There is no Kyrie Irving. There is no Kevin Durant. Both those guys were traded last week to the Mavs and Suns, respectively. Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges made their debuts for the Nets in a very close loss to the Sixers. A very, very good game you did not watch on Saturday night at Barclays. So with KD and Kyrie gone, how do the Knicks change their game plan against Brooklyn? I mean, I'm sure it becomes a lot easier to guard them for sure. But how does this affect the matchup between the Nets and Knicks not having those megastars out there?
Yeah, it's obviously a completely different game plan as opposed to kind of shutting down one or two guys and kind of focusing on those guys and preventing them from beating you. The Nets have a far more balanced squad right now and certainly more defensive minded. There's obviously anytime you lose a top 15, top 20 player of all time and Kevin Durant, there's going to be some adjustments. But the Nets right now have a very balanced team, a good all around team. They're long, they're lengthy. They play defense. Guys like obviously Mikal Bridges, Dorian Finney-Smith's an excellent wing defender. Nick Claxton is in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. And then they still obviously can score some points. Cameron Johnson, back-to-back 44-point games. Joe Harris, scored 18 off the bench on Saturday night. So there's Cameron Johnson, another sharpshooter that they got in the Phoenix deal. It'll be interesting. This Nets team kind of reminds me of the last time we saw the Nets without KD, that right before they signed, Kyrie and Durant that summer of 2019, they, hustle and they got Dinwiddie there. They play with a little bit of, a little bit more energy, a little bit more force, a little bit more toughness, as opposed to just the exceptional skills of just basically leaning on those guys, the KDs and Kyries. So we'll see. But yeah, it seems kind of, if there was ever a time for that, the Knicks want to snap that 9-game losing streak, now would seem to be the time. No KD, no Kyrie, an opportunity. You're at home in the Garden to kind of get back on track. And also these two teams, it's not far-fetched and we'll talk about it here in a moment. Could the Knicks catch the Nets in the for the 5th or 6th seed? And if you envision yourself as avoiding the play-in and securing a playoff spot, the Nets might have to be the team, depending on if Miami stumbles a little bit here, but the Nets might have to be the team you catch. And obviously head-to-head games are going to be important.
Yeah, the Knicks already dropped 2 games to the Nets already, so now they have to try to tie them to kind of force the tiebreaker to be something other than head-to-head matchups. So this is a big game for the Knicks when it comes to playoff situations and playoff implications for this one. Yeah, the Nets. I mean, obviously, I'd much prefer to face this version of Nets than Nets that had Kyrie and KD. But they do present some problems with some of the guys they have. Like you mentioned, they have some really good defenders. I mean, Bridges, Finney-Smith. They already still have Royce O'Neal. They have multiple guys who should be able to handle Barrett and Randall in this game. So I think that's going to be matchups to watch, how the Nets rotate their multiple lengthy, rangy combo forwards that they have. It's a very kind of odd team the way they're put together. I don't think this is necessarily the plan moving forward to keep all these guys together. But I think to start with what they have right now, they're still going to be a somewhat of a formidable team in a formidable matchup. Spencer Dinwiddie, as Knicks fans know, always seems to have something for the Knicks, whether it be on social media talking before games or how he plays in the games against the Knicks. He usually plays extremely well. So I would expect that he would probably have a really good game in this one. So it should be a good game. I think the Knicks do have some advantages, particularly, with Brunson, of course, at the point guard spot now. That's no longer, a Wash or a Kyrie advantage there. So I think Brunson maybe could have a big game. And I do want to continue to see what Josh Hart can bring to the table. He's playing against a lot of guys who I think kind of do the same things he does. So it should be funny to see how that matchup works out.
You know what's crazy, EJ, is we could talk for we talked for a few minutes about this game. We talked for another 10 minutes, and we still haven't mentioned Ben Simmons.
I know.
The highest paid player on the Nets by far. He's making 36 million this year. No other player on the team is making more than 20 million. So yeah, I'll be interested. You kind of don't know. It's hit or miss on Simmons. Some nights he'll give you 9, 8, and 7, and other nights he's just invisible. His minutes are trending in the wrong direction now that the Nets have plenty of depth on the wing and at the 4. Obviously Simmons can fit in anywhere. He has that versatile skill set when he's engaged and locked in. But we haven't seen that version of Ben Simmons, basically in two or 3 years now. So we'll see if he can make an impact, if he can start to carve his way. But it is really shocking to see. You watch some Net games, you totally forget that he's even on the team, as we did discussing him. But in terms of obviously Brunson is considering the Mikal Bridges and the length that Claxton kind of clogging the paint is going to be difficult for Randall to kind of bully his way to the basket as he does against a lot of other teams that don't have talented shot blockers and defenders at the 4 and at the forward spot. So maybe Randall takes a few more threes. The other thing to keep an eye on with Brunson, some teams have been starting to run doubles at him more frequently because he's just been that good, and we'll talk about it in a second. How well he's been playing over the last couple of weeks and making a bid for the AllStar game. He really is playing at an incredibly high level. Not only is he producing at a high level, the efficiency is remarkable. So teams understand that, and they want to take away. He's been the Knicks' best, most efficient offensive weapon. They're going to want to take that away. So we'll see if Dinwiddie's not really somebody that can stay in front of Brunson. We'll see if they put. I'll be interested to see if they put Bridges on him. Obviously, those guys. Yeah. I think they will as well. There's some Villanova connection there, obviously, with Hart, and I forget who. Somebody on. I think it might have been Bridges or maybe it was Hart, but they all went to dinner in the city on Sunday night or after the game or before or Saturday night. But there was some images. So those guys are close. That will be an interesting matchup. I think definitely to keep an eye on. If I wouldn't be surprised if Bridges tells Jacques Vaughn, like, I got that dude, and we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, Bridges is absolutely one of the best on-ball defenders in the league. So if that does become the matchup to watch, that should be a really fun one, especially fun for the Nova grads. Plenty of them in New York who are happy to see some of these cats make it to the Knicks and Nets over the past few weeks and over the past year with Brunson joining the team as well. So Knicks and Nets in this one, we talk about the standings and where the Knicks stand. I think that the Knicks are going to have a shot at catching the Nets. I think the Nets, they showed in that game against Philly, they're not a doormat with the guys they have. I do think that was kind of maybe your first game together where you kind of give it your all, and there's a lot of energy and a lot of emotion because you want to kind of show that, hey, we're not going to fall apart here down the stretch. So I think they're going to be pesky, but we see the Knicks right now as we record this podcast on Monday, 3 games out behind Brooklyn as we stand right now. That's not insurmountable for them. Obviously, they're only a game and a half behind Miami for the 6th spot. But could Knicks catch Brooklyn 3 games back? I think that's plenty. They're 4 back in the loss column, so a little bit of work to do there. But I think that the Knicks can catch this team. The Knicks do have a kind of a tricky schedule, but the Nets also don't have an easy schedule down the stretch either. So that should help them as well. This is going to be huge. But I do think that if you're looking at trying to catch one of these top 6 spots that you mentioned, the Nets are going to be a team they're going to have to beat when they play them, and a team that may be the team they have to catch because Miami is getting in shape. They're 3 games on a 3-game winning streak. They've won 7 out of 10, so it's going to be tough to catch Miami. Brooklyn, who's lost 6 out of the last 10 games, and of course now we're an entirely new team. That might be the team you're looking at and say, hey, this is our chance to get in.
Definitely. I'm a little bit higher on the Nets, I think, than most. I just like their core. I like the way they're going to compete. I like their, I like the guys that they kept and the guys that they added in, and they're playing with a little something to prove. They hear Kyrie's comments
Yeah.
about like just kind of bashing Brooklyn on his way out of town, and I think they I think that they just have again a scrappy young group of guys that guys are going to compete every night. You don't have closers, so that's going to make it difficult to finish in the fourth quarter. But I think they're going to be in a lot of close games. Vegas has this as a 3-point spread. The Knicks given and usually the home team gets around a 3-point advantage. So that kind of tells you that they view in terms of talent on both rosters relatively similar. And I think if the Nets were starting, I agree with you. This is not the finished product that Sean Marks envisioned. I think he had to adjust on the fly. I don't think he would have made the trade for Kyrie if he knew he was also going to trade Kevin Durant. It sounds like they were, kind of going back and forth. So I think they'll make some adjustments over the summer. Just one other point while we're on Brooklyn that I find interesting is the two guys that left. Look at the way they handled their business. They both wanted out less, prior to the prior to this season. Obviously, Durant had voiced his displeasure, and even the year before, both players had the options to sign max contracts. Kevin Durant did, locked in for 4 years, got his money. Kyrie didn't, for whatever Kyrie's reasons are. Vaccine mandate came down in New York City. He decided not to get vaccinated. The season exploded. They had to trade James Harden and had to take back Ben Simmons. Just a nightmare of a trade. Anyway, fast forward a year. Kyrie again publicly demands a trade, leaks it to multiple outlets, leaks it that he may not play the rest of the season if he isn't traded. Instead of going to the Lakers, where he wanted to end up, he's in Dallas. Kevin Durant, on the other hand, behind the scenes, goes privately to Sean Marks, says, I want to play for the Suns. Can we please, let's work together to try to, do something that's good for the organization and good for me as an individual. He gets traded to Phoenix and now has a very good chance to win a championship. So just says a little bit, and Kyrie bashing the Nets, he's so happy in Dallas, but all he's talking about is how the Nets did him wrong, even though they paid him $135 million to play in about 5 games. And I assume Kevin Durant hasn't talked to the media yet. I assume he'll take the high road and compliment, say, be thankful for Brooklyn for everything they did, yada, yada, yada. Just kind of goes to show you that that sometimes things come around, and this, what goes around comes around type of thing in the NBA. But as far as the Nets team going forward, I think they're a scrappy bunch. I think the Net fans are going to enjoy rooting for that team. And they're going to be a tough out in the playoffs and in games like this, especially they're going to be up for the Knicks contest. So but I agree with you. And I just pulled up the Tankathon remaining schedule strength. Very interesting. The Knicks are 6th, so the Knicks have the 6th toughest remaining strength of schedule. The Nets have the 7th toughest. So they're tied. 51.6 basically win percentage among the teams that they're facing. And also interesting, Miami's 4th, right above them. So those 3 teams are they're going to be chasing each other. It's we got 2 months left the season now, so we can start keeping an eye on the standings. And obviously the other team we want to keep an eye on is the Hawks. The Knicks are just a game and a half ahead of Atlanta, so we'll see how that plays itself out. But should make for some very interesting games. Some kind of every night basis. We'll have a lot to talk about.
Yeah. And you mentioned the Hawks. That's a good point as well, because if they don't make the play-in and make the playoffs and they have to play in a play-in game, you want to be at home for your first play-in game. And if the Hawks are nipping at your heels, what the Knicks do not want is to find a way where the Hawks catch them and they're in the 8th spot and they got to travel to Atlanta to play the Hawks. And that's been a house of horrors for this Knicks team, particularly big games that they've needed to get when they have to travel to Atlanta. Not that Trae Young hasn't had his performances at Madison Square Garden as well too, but you want to make sure you can have that game at home. So the Knicks Nets should be a good one. Real quickly before I move on, do you feel like the sting from the Knicks Nets rivalry has kind of been taken away with KD and Kyrie gone now? Like, I don't know how you feel or how other Knicks fans feel, but I certainly don't feel the level of animosity to this version of the Nets as opposed to if this team was playing the KD Kyrie Nets, prior to the trade deadline.
100%. Yeah, it just doesn't have the same juice. Obviously, with the comments Kevin Durant had made about it not being cool and the Knicks aren't the cool thing anymore, and obviously Kyrie amped up the intensity as well. So yeah, it just doesn't have that same that same level of it's not a hatred certainly by any means. Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson and Cam Thomas and those guys don't exactly generate the same level of
Right.
vitriol that KD and the gang did. But the other thing that makes it a little bit more interesting is that these teams could potentially, are fighting for playoff spots. And
Yeah, that's true.
you talk about the 7-8. It wouldn't be crazy. There's a ton of games left if the Heat and the Hawks are the teams that finish 5 and 6, and the Knicks and the Nets play that 7-8 game, which would certainly generate a ton of buzz in the city. So certainly something. But they, while it doesn't have that same level of animosity, maybe there could be more at stake than even any Knick game and Knick Nets game in recent years.
Yep, Knicks Nets 7:30, Madison Square Garden should be a good one. So let's get to this nonsense, as I will call it, as 3 players are named as injury replacements for this week's All-Star game. Jalen Brunson, not one of them, despite how great he's played recently. Anthony Edwards, De'Aaron Fox, and Pascal Siakam will replace Steph Curry, Zion Williamson, and Kevin Durant in the All-Star game that's taking place on Sunday. There was no announcement for Jalen Brunson amongst one of these replacements. He did not make the original cut of players that were named to the All-Star game. The original 24 guys named 12 guys from the East. With the replacements, the NBA, I don't think really put out great information in terms of who's replacing who, but I presume that Siakam was replacing Durant as the Eastern Conference representative, because Durant, when he was in the East, was named an All-Star. So you lost an Eastern Conference player there. I don't think they've still said what they're doing with Kyrie Irving. I guess they're going to keep him as the Eastern Conference guy. It doesn't really matter in the sense that there's still there is no East versus West in this game. So, guys are just going to be drafted by Team LeBron and Team Giannis. So maybe it doesn't matter, but you would think that someone would have to replace him if he now becomes a Western Conference player, but that's neither here nor there. So Brunson left off again. You talked about how great Brunson's been playing. Are you surprised that the NBA, and this is an Adam Silver decision to be clear, Adam Silver is the guy who names the replacement for guys who get hurt. So he picked these 3 guys. Brunson was not one of them. Were you surprised that he wasn't picked?
I am. Listen, I'll give you some numbers here just because it really is important to note just how well this dude is playing. NBA announced All-Star reserves on Thursday, February 2nd, about 11 days ago. Knicks have played 5 games since then. In those games, Jalen Brunson's averaging 31 points, 6.2 assists versus just 1.4 turnovers, while shooting 59% from the floor, 52% from downtown. To put that efficiency in context, Brunson has scored a total of 155 points on 89 field goal attempts in the month of February. RJ Barrett has 98 points on 91 field goals. Among all players, Brunson ranks 30th in the NBA in field goal attempts per game in February, but 6th in scoring. He's one of only 4 players in the NBA averaging more than 30 points a night and shooting above 55% from the floor this month. The other 3 are Giannis, Joel Embiid, and LeBron James. One last number for you. This one I thought was really interesting. On the season, Brunson has a chance to become just the 3rd player in NBA history to average at least 20 points and 6 assists while slashing 48, 40, 85, meaning he's shooting at least 48% from the floor, 40% from downtown, and 85% from the line. So not the 50, 40, 90. That's kind of the hallmark, the benchmark for production, for efficiency. But you factor in the fact that he's averaging more than 20 points and more than 6 assists. Only 2 players in NBA history have ever done that over a full season. It's Larry Bird and Steph Curry, 2 pretty decent players. So,
yeah, they carved out a pretty nice career from them.
Yeah, they stuck around for a little bit. So you talk about that production. He's 2nd in the league in charges drawn. And more than that, I think just big picture, think about where this team has been, not only last season, 37 wins, but for 2 decades, kind of rudderless, laughing stock of a franchise, point guard, no point guard to speak of. Brunson comes in, immediately changes the tone, changes the complexion, changes the direction of the franchise. So I think you wrap all that in. Could you make a case for Pascal Siakam? Sure, he's having a pretty good season, but the Raptors are far below 500. So for me, it's almost an easy decision to. I thought you could have made a very strong case that Brunson should have been named one of the original replacements. But again, we talked about positionality of it factors in when you're naming replacements now. And we'll see. It sounds like Jaylen Brown might miss the game as well. He's dealing with a facial fracture.
Yes.
There could be one other player added in. Long story short, Jalen Brunson should be an NBA All-Star this season.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Like, I was disappointed. Here's why I wasn't necessarily surprised. Because I think when I hear Adam Silver is making the decisions and you pick Pascal Siakam, I see, okay, you're trying to get the Canadian market to watch this game. Because it's not just Toronto. Now it's the whole country that kind of supports the Toronto Raptors. So you already got Julius Randle, a Knick going to the game. So New York is covered, even though Kyrie and KD are gone. You still have a New York player playing in this game. And I'm sure KD and Kyrie still have their fans in the city. But when you add another player, I think in some way you're trying to add a new market to the game. So, you add Anthony Edwards, who's well deserving, a guy who I think should have made it from the West Side in the first crack, potentially. He gets in, that adds a Minnesota, market. Sacramento, they already had, Sabonis, so he was already there. So De'Aaron Fox, that was just them, I think, doing right by him. That was, I think, still the most egregious snub of all of them, even including Jalen Brunson. But to me, that's what this came down to. It was, well, we got to add another player. Who can we add that, is a market that's not being represented at the All-Star game right now? Oh, it's a whole country? Well, that makes it a lot easier. I know there are a lot of people in New York, but Canada is a whole country. And I think that they decided to put Pascal Siakam in there. That shouldn't have mattered. Like, to me, it should be on the merit of who should be the best players, who's impacted the season the most. But I think that's why they did this. And it's frustrating. Like, Pascal Siakam's had a great season. I don't want to undermine that in terms of individual stats. I mean, he's averaging 25 points, shooting almost 50% from the field. He's got 8 rebounds, 6 assists. He's a do-it-all guy. I mean, he had 50 at Madison Square Garden, so you got to tell Knicks fans about how great Pascal Siakam has played this year. But his team is not very good, and he is not being able to impact winning for the Toronto Raptors enough to keep the Raptors in the conversation for a playoff spot. So to put him in and not put in Jalen Brunson, I think has been one of the stories of the NBA season. I'm not saying he's the top story, but the fact that Jalen Brunson went to essentially a point guard desert, which was New York. They had a good point guard. You can say arguably since Stephon Marbury, but maybe you go back even further if you don't think Stephon Marbury was your cup of tea because the Knicks didn't win much with him. Like, they didn't have this man. It's a guard city that had no guards playing for their New York team. And Jalen Brunson goes on a team that missed the playoffs and looked like they were directionless last season, gets them in a position where they're fighting for a playoff spot. They've been competitive every night, and part of it, the main reason, has been his effort. The fact that they didn't look at and value that storyline in putting him in the All-Star game. That's what's disappointing to me, because that to me, Pascal Siakam having a good year. There are plenty of guys who average 25 and 8 who missed the playoffs, who missed the All-Star game. Like, it's fine. If he didn't make it this year, it would not have been a tragedy. I think, considering what Brunson has brought to the city, what he's brought to this organization, to not have that represented in the All-Star game, it doesn't make sense to me. Because the All-Star game should be a representation of like what have been the big stories of the season. Like, you want to talk about the players that played the best, who have had the big moments. Like, in some ways, it's a celebration of what has happened so far. I just don't see anything the Raptors have done or Pascal Siakam has done that just had to be represented in this game. I don't. If his team was better, absolutely, he's having a great season individually. But I don't see. There's no story to what Pascal Siakam has done for the Raptors. There's nothing.
And similarly, Anthony Edwards, the Timberwolves had some high expectations, trading, all those picks for Gobert, and were they going to be one of the top, 3 or 4 teams in the West, and they haven't been that. Again, you're picking it because both of these guys have played very well, if you're going to put someone in, you want to take someone out. Personally, I would have gone with Brunson. And the other thing I didn't even mention, he leads the league in clutch points. Just the importance of again, it just lends to credence to the fact that Randall, we know, cannot deliver in the, is inconsistent in the clutch. Let's say RJ Barrett has certainly had his moments, but it's not something you can rely on night in, night out basis. Brunson's been the guy. They put the ball in his hands, and more often than not, he's delivered. For me, I'm surprised he's not in there. That being said, him getting 3 or 4 days of rest is not the worst thing. We know about the minutes he's logged. We know about those are not typical minutes. He, as I mentioned, drawing charges, falling down on drives. He lives amongst the trees in the forest and gets knocked down plenty. So if he takes a couple nights off to go to Cancun, that certainly wouldn't be the worst thing from a Knicks franchise perspective, from a team that hopes to make a push towards the number 6 or 5 seed over the final 2 months of the season.
One last thing, there is part of me, considering this is an Adam Silver decision, there's part of me that wonders if anything involving the tampering could be why he held out Jalen Brunson. Because it's hard to say the league takes it that seriously, considering it's so rampant in the NBA. But they say they take it seriously. So could he decided, look, like I didn't like the tampering situation with the Knicks and Jalen Brunson that happened in the offseason. So Pascal Siakam, here you go. Could that have been a part of this? It wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me with the way the NBA works, and there's a lot of politics involved, and the Knicks haven't necessarily ingratiated themselves with the NBA offices for some of the antics of not just the tampering, but the stuff with the media, the headlines with the facial recognition. So they haven't necessarily brought great headlines to the NBA outside of the Knicks playing pretty good this year. So it could be them saying, hey, you got one All-Star, I'm not giving you any more because you caused a lot of other headaches that we don't really want to deal with. So that could be the case. You mentioned the Jaylen Brown facial fracture. So I don't know why the Celtics would let him play in the game. I know I guess he may still play with the fracture, but that doesn't make sense to me. So you're going to have to replace him, you would think. I mean, I don't know who else you're picking, especially in the East, that you would take. I guess Harden would be the only guy.
I think it's either him or Harden. But
and Harden's played really well this season. But like I said, I think they had their elimination game at the Garden a couple weeks ago, and then Brunson outplayed the Knicks one, and then they played a couple the next week, and even though the Sixers won, Brunson had his best half of the season in that first half. So I'm like, I think that Brunson really deserves to get in. We'll see if he does eventually get in, but as Tommy noted, Brunson getting a few days off, not the worst thing in the world. But I think that's going to wrap it for this edition of Orange and Blue Bloods. Tommy, let people know where they can find you.
At Tommy Beer on Twitter.
You can find me, EJ_Stewart on Twitter, Action EJ on Instagram and TikTok. Thank you so much for checking out this edition of Orange and Blue Bloods and Audacy WFAN original. Make sure if you like this episode, wherever you're listening to this episode, make sure the auto download feature so you can get these episodes whenever we drop. We got 2 more coming the rest of this week, so make sure you keep your eyes and ears peeled for that. Also, make sure you check us out on YouTube on the Audacy Sports channel. You can get all our videos there and the full episodes there as well. So that's going to do it for this edition of Orange and Blue Bloods. For Tommy, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.